Hello Periscope, welcome to another episode with me, Will John, and today we have our chairman, Mike Sturgess. Today we're going to talk about the key findings of our interfirm comparison survey. So Mike, what was the purpose of this survey?
Well, we work with firms quite a bit on practice management. We're going in and talking to them. We're often discussing issues like fees per principal, profitability and so on. So over the years we've gained quite a bit of understanding about the structure and the finances behind practices, and I can look at a set of accounts and say that figure looks a bit high, that looks a bit low, but every now and again it's good to benchmark formally because you can't really see trends when you're just talking to individual firms, one at a time. So we brought this together, we sent out an in-firm comparison, and we've sort of compared the results that we got this year with those for the last one we did, which was actually 2005, so 10 years ago.
Right, so that's interesting. So that was 10 years ago. So how many firms took part this time, and what were the key findings from this report?
Okay, well, we had 47 firms take part. We would have loved to have had more, but if you want a comprehensive survey, it's actually quite a complicated, and there's a lot of information it requiring. It takes quite a while to do it. So there's always a balance between quality, we've got lots of information, in quantity, we've got lots of people but only a little amount of information. So we had 47 people take part. We've split the data by geographical region. When we did the 2005 survey, we actually didn't have our London office, whereas now probably half of our business is in London and the South East. So we've done it by the sort of London and South East and the various regions. We've also done it by size of firm. So when we did it 10 years ago, if we applied CPI, the Consumer Price Index, to the figures from 10 years ago, you would expect a 28% increase over that period. So one of the surprises was the average fees 10 years ago per principal was £378,000. So we would expect that under CPI to be 484,000 if we just apply that 28%. But when we looked at the average on this survey, overall the average in the regions was still only 385. Now that compares with the 378 10 years ago. And in London, in the South East, it was £500,000, £516,000. So fees per principal haven't kept up with inflation. And not surprisingly, fees per principal haven't kept up with inflation, nor has profits. So the profits per principal, if we're going back a while ago, if we're looking at that side, it's actually fallen on a like-for-like basis. So in London and the South East, we've got £149,000 per principal, and in the regional firms, it's £116,000. Other significant change we had was on goodwill. Now, 10 years ago, about half the firms charged for goodwill on the way in and gave principals goodwill on the way out, and half didn't. And the ratio is still the same, but what has changed is the percentage. And there's been a slight fall in the percentage, the amount of goodwill that people are paying. And I think this is often due to the different ways in which people are dealing with goodwill. There are some firms that will pay just to have in their accounts a flat rate for goodwill and it doesn't change year on year. Others do a percentage of fees. But there's more of a trend these days for looking at some form of goodwill along the lines of an annuity. So we'll pay maybe £20,000 or £30,000 per annum for 5 to 10 years. Now, in the survey we did this year, if we took the sort of the lower and the upper quartile, which is where the main data comes from, it's ranging from 40% to 100%, with the average at 67%. So even if people are, say, paying an annuity, what we said is take all of the partners, assume they're all retiring today, what were they entitled to, and then calculate that as a percentage of fees. So we've got comparisons. So quite a few changes.
Yeah, well, exactly. There's a few changes there. So with these results, should firms be worried?
Well, you'd think so. With fees per partner and profitability per partner falling, you would look at that. But I think actually the fees, the profitability and the goodwill are interrelated. And I think it relates to the structure of practices. If you go back to the old model with an old partnership structure, you would not promote a manager to, normally they go from manager to salaried partner, but it would be a stepping stone to equity partner. And you wouldn't actually look to make somebody an equity partner unless you've got a space, i.e. the firm is growing and we need another partner, or one of the partners is retiring and we're looking to replace them. What we've got now is lots of firms incorporating, so it can be a limited company or LLPs, and so it's easier to separate out the equity from the management. So I could promote a manager to a director in a company, and effectively they may not get paid any more. So as an example, imagine you've got a sole practitioner with 3 managers. The sole practitioner has got £1 million fees, and they are out there. He's making £300,000 profits, and he's got 3 managers that he's paying between them 200,000. So we've got fees per principal 1 million, profits per principal 300. Let's say they incorporate and he makes the 3 managers directors. Now we've got 4 principals. So the average fee's fallen from 1 million to 250,000, and we stick their 200,000 salaries onto the profit side. So now the profits of the practice is £500,000, but split between 4, so it's 125,000. But it's the same firm with the same people doing the same work and the same numbers. So I think what we're seeing is this just difference between the structures and more separation between equity and management.
Well, okay, fabulous. That's great. So apart from these points you just raised, are there any other key points that were raised during the survey and things that you could point out now?
Yep, we looked at loads of figures, but one that stood out is we always ask for the productivity, which is a key thing that we're looking for. We focus a lot on the partner or the principal's productivity, and this came out at about 900 hours. So we've got 900 hours per principal charged, bearing in mind that most of these guys are probably working 45 hours plus, so they're doing something like 2,300, 2,400 hours, and only 900 are chargeable. 10 years ago, that was 1,000 hours. Now, there's no geographical difference, but if you look at the size of firms, as we would expect, the smaller firms, the partners are more involved in it. So with a sole practitioner, we're looking at 974 hours on average. A 2 to 5 principal firm, we were looking at 925. And when you get to a firm with 6 principals, you're down to 6 principals or more, you're down to 690. So they're very much more involved, but possibly more going out and getting clients and doing that sort of work, what we would call development work rather than productive work. Now, I think why is it fallen on average from 1,000 to 900? And I think regulation's got something to do with it. There's a huge more regulation that we've got to deal with now. And there's also this thing called the dreaded email. I mean, you're never not online, you're never protected from emails unless you actively shut Outlook down. And I think this has had an impact on productivity as well. The one area where there was improvement over that 10 years was in lockup. Now lockup is work in progress at selling price, and you include the partners, the principal's time, and you ignore UITF 40. So it's work in progress at selling price plus debtors less VAT. And you add those two together and either do it as a percentage of fees or do it as a number of months worth of work that you've got to carry before you can get paid. Now in 2005 the average was 37%, which is 4.4 months, and in this survey it's fallen to 33.8%, which is 4 months. So it's not a huge difference, but we have actually shaved it. And if we go back more than 10 years ago, historically the average was about 5.5 months. So probably over 20 years we've come down from 5.5 to 4.5 to 4. So cash management is a lot better.
Fabulous. Yeah, that's great. Right. So thank you everyone for viewing us on Periscope today, and thank you to all the firms that actually did the survey. We are really grateful for your efforts. If you want to view this again, it's going to be on YouTube straight afterwards. Mike, do you have anything else to add?
No, before we get lots of requests for the survey, we did send it out on the basis that it's only fair that only those that participate get the full survey. So we've kind of given you the heads up here, but we're not looking to send out a copy of the survey to all and sundry, I'm afraid.
Fabulous. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.